Hello and welcome to Strategic News International. I'm Parul, Chandra, and I have with me today the opinion editor of SNI, Ashwin Ahmad, and I'm going to be discussing with him the events unfolding in Syria and in the region after US President Donald Trump announced the withdrawal of troops from Syria. Welcome to this episode of Our Take, Ashwin. Now, President Trump has announced the withdrawal of troops. And just yesterday, Russian President Putin and Turkish President Erdogan have just inked a deal, and they're going to be having a 6-day ceasefire in eastern Syria. So what do you make of this, especially because a lot of analysts are saying that this brings Russia back into the Syrian political situation?
Well, Parul, Trump withdrawing, that was in the cards for some time. He had talked about the Syrian rebel forces as being no angels. He had talked about the decimation of ISIS. So it was on the cards for some time that he was going to pull out Syrian forces. That was a given. The US is divided on this, but I think President Trump has realized there is no political gain in keeping troops in Syria. There's going to be a minimal force perhaps to look after oil interests. But I think Trump has decided that there is no scope in West Asia. As far as Russia is concerned, Russia wants to safeguard Bashar al-Assad. That it has wanted to do for some time throughout. That has been their policy. Now, when we come to the agreement, they want to set up safe zones within Syria where they want to contain the Kurdish rebel forces, the Kurdish fighters and the militants, because they don't want them coming into they want them coming into Syria basically. Because the thing is, both Russia and Europe, the West, they are very afraid of Kurdish and militants coming into Turkey, because Turkey is very strategically located. It is located next to Europe, it is located next to Russia, so ISIS forces are more likely to go there, and that's a huge concern.
As you rightly said, that they want to contain, say, the ISIS and as well as, the Kurdish fighters. But now there are fears that because US is withdrawing boots from the ground, and they were allied with the Turkish fighters who were then again fighting the ISIS.
Right.
So does ISIS again make a comeback, which is what is being feared now?
Well, Parul, it's a case of optics. I mean, the ISIS being quote unquote released because of the US withdrawal, the Syrian democratic fighters who've been fighting them, they don't have the US to back them. So in a sense, Turkey is there taking on the ISIS. So I don't see an immediate threat. But it will certainly incentivize other militant groups, especially North Africa, Libya, etc. So that's a worrying trend. And we do have in northwest Syria, we have the Jabal al-Nusra. So ISIS fighters are reportedly having gone there. So yes, there is a threat of ISIS. How big is it remains to be seen.
Now, there is a threat of ISIS. India also has fears about ISIS. There have been Indians in the past who have gone and joined the ranks of ISIS.
Correct.
So where do you think that India stands on this issue? So does India need to again start worrying about these elements, especially because India itself has been a huge victim of terrorism?
I don't think in the immediate medium term that India really needs to worry about ISIS, but the resurgence of ISIS is certainly a concern, especially if sleeper cells that especially from the south, etc., are activated. But right now, ISIS is not the bigger picture. The bigger picture is what Turkey is going to do, what Russia is going to do. Basically, the biggest concern or the thing we should look at now, what role is Iran going to play? Syria is very important for Iran because it has stood by Iran, it has been a strategic ally throughout, and also Iran uses Syria as a conduit to reach out to Lebanon, which where the Hezbollah is, as you know.
Yes, yes.
So I think we have to watch very carefully. Russia also has interests. It has military presence in Syria. So I think we need to watch these two actors because the US leaving has created a vacuum.
Yes, that's for sure. Now, you mentioned that Russia, you see, they're talking Turkey, of course, they've struck a deal. Now, India is going through a particularly bad patch where its bilateral relations with Turkey are concerned. We've had good ties in the past,
Yes.
but now with the president making anti-India statements or talking about how India has occupied or invaded Kashmir after the revocation of Article 370. Do you think that India would still be talking to Turkey on these matters, or are they not talking at all?
I think, if we look at India's policy regarding West Asia, our Prime Minister has primarily reached out to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan. So he has achieved major successes with these three countries, regardless of the OIC resolutions. For me, OIC resolutions aren't very important because a member country can put up anything. So we have to now, when it comes to Turkey, we have to look at what's happening in West Asia. There is a power play between Saudi Arabia and Turkey for the Sunni Islamic vote. So right now, Erdogan is trying to set himself up as the major player in West Asia. So he is making these statements to say that, basically I'm the boss, I'm the leader here in West Asia. I don't think India can do anything right now because we don't have any, and also Turkey isn't in our immediate neighborhood. But yes, I'm sure we'll work on them.
Yeah, and Prime Minister Modi, in fact, is headed for Saudi Arabia later this month. So I'm sure they're going to be talking about the situation unfolding in the region where Syria is concerned, where Turkey is concerned. And of course, Saudi Arabia has, we've had particularly good ties with them of late.
Correct.
So I'm sure they'll be going to be talking about these two things. Now, since we are talking about Kashmir, what about Malaysia? You see, India again, very upset with Malaysia with the statements of their Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, who's again been making statements that have really irked India again on Kashmir. Why do you think this is happening?
Mahathir Mohamad, well, he's 90 plus. He also has ambitions of being an Islamic player. So for him, it's important to show his domestic constituency that he is a major Islamic player. So for him to appease that constituency is more important than, having relations with India at the moment. India, I'm sure, will work on Malaysia, but right now it's not a major concern for him. If you look at Zakir Naik, he's made conflicting statements. So he's played this issue back and forth.
Yes.
And I think he'll continue to do so.
Yes, I think he's probably not worried that India is going to stop importing palm oil from Malaysia.
Yes, that's right.
There have been reports on that.
Yes. For Mahathir Mohamad, I think right now the bigger interest for him is China. I don't think he's too focused on India. But I'm sure India is working with him in the region. We are also focused on ASEAN and China. So Malaysia isn't in our immediate horizon as far as I can see. But I'm sure we are working on him.
Bringing you back to Syria and the Kurds, what happens to them? You see, there are reports that they have nearly 12,000 ISIS fighters in their custody. Now, they don't any longer have US backing.
Correct.
So now what happens to the Kurdish fighters?
A very good question, Parul. Now, the Kurdish fighters are basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. They've been abandoned by the US. The idea of an independent Kurdistan, basically it's a free run for Erdogan. Everyone's given him the go-ahead to march into Syria, to decimate the Kurdish fighters. So he gets to be a player in the region. He gets to knock out basically the Kurdish troops, which were against Turkey and wanted to create an independent Turkish state. He has basically been told by Russia and Iran that you can go up to a point to create safe zones, which is what he's agreed to. Now, what is interesting here is that it's a win-win for everyone. If the Syrian refugees, if the Kurdish people remain within those safe zones in Syria, it benefits both Russia, both the United States. It benefits Turkey, because then the Syrian refugees don't come into Turkey. Already over 3 million refugees are entering Turkey, which they don't want. So for right now, Erdogan is the kingmaker.
Yeah, so finally, how would you sum up the current play of politics? Trump is out, Russia's back in the game. They're getting what they wanted as the end game in the Syrian civil war. But do you think that Trump will just sit back and let Russia rule the roost?
Parul, it's very difficult to predict what Mr. Donald Trump will do. It's very difficult to predict what will happen in West Asia. The best of analysts are proved wrong the next day. So, but what I see is there's a very divided house in the US. Like I said before, President Trump has faced massive opposition on this. Whether he succeeds or not in pulling out these troops from Syria still remains to be seen. He desperately wants a win. Whether that will happen, we'll again have to wait and see. Right now, like I said, it's advantage Erdogan. The third point is, it's a worry, I think, especially in North Africa. It could be a cause of concern if ISIS re-emerges. It's still an if, because they could go into Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and there could be a resurgence. So I think if they do go there, this is going to be a worry. And fourth, if ISIS comes up, ISIS, I would say, is a brand name in terms of militants. So if ISIS comes up, it is a rallying point for all the other militant organizations, wherever they are. So this could, and I'm just saying could, incentivize young militants, perhaps within India, to go forth and perhaps join them. And that's a worry for everyone.
Yes, a potentially explosive situation. We can never tell.
Absolutely.
And of course, as far as President Trump is concerned, we may just have to wait for his next tweet.
Absolutely. I think that sums up particularly West Asia, but it's advantage Russia, advantage Iran, and advantage Turkey at the moment. I think President Trump has removing of the US presence, or at least talking about the removing of the US presence. We'll see a very different ball game coming out. A Russian presence in West Asia, Russia, Turkey, Iran, it could change the geopolitics of West Asia completely. The US hold that we saw on Iran and Saudi Arabia, all that politics could change tomorrow. We may have a very different kingmaker if Turkey comes to the fore. India may even have to look at different binaries.
So let's wait and watch the situation as it unfolds, Ashwin.
Yes, absolutely.